Hi, and welcome to the Restorative Wellness Clinicians Corner, video series exclusively for functional health professionals, where we interview the top experts in the latest research, products, tools, and best practices for getting your clients exceptional results. Welcome, everybody, to today's episode of the RWS Clinicians Corner. I am so excited about our conversation today. We have Sinclair Kennally with us here today, and I'm going to read Sinclair's formal bio, but I want to tell you my experience of Sinclair before I read the formal situation here. Sinclair is an absolute dynamo, and she is a fighter. She is someone who will fight for your health. She will fight for your business success. She will fight for your greatness. Like when I think of Sinclair, I just think of this force. And my personal experience with her is that she just will not let you play small in your life, in your health, in anything. This is her with her clients, and helping them just really sometimes take on the medical system, take on, as we all do, we have, as practitioners, our clients have been told everything's fine, their labs look like. She just doesn't take that for an answer. She will fight for their health. She will fight for full resolution. And she's also an incredible business coach who has helped countless of health professionals. In fact, many of you might have met her already. She was part of the Exactly How To series that we promoted. She taught how to do high ticket sales. That is one of her superpowers. And so if you were lucky to participate in that, then you know what a dynamo she is. She is phenomenal. So Sinclair, I'm going to read the formal bio too, because it's a phenomenal bio. So just take notes on how she structured her bio. It's so great. So Sinclair Kennally is affectionately called the Liver Lady and Chief Talking Officer, I love, of Detox Rejuvenation. She's not just an award-winning expert on chronic digestive illnesses, host of Your Health Reset podcast, and survivor of complex chronic illness. She is on a very clear mission. Sinclair, along with her partner, Michael Spandau, seek to build a movement uniting change makers and assisting you to show up fully so that you can do your best work. By resolving the root causes behind complex chronic illness and digestive issues, Sinclair and Michael have helped tens of thousands of people, from NASA scientists to authors to pro athletes, to get their lives back. Sinclair stands out in her philosophy and the way she tackles root causes and toxic exposures. Think parasites, mold, liver stagnation, gut health issues, nervous system dysregulation, and more. And it's not just about the physical body. We are bioelectrical beings with complex nervous systems. Healing is layered, and for Sinclair, our mental, emotional, and spiritual awareness are vital parts of the healing process. This mindset has created raving fans with her Rapid Liver Reset, Rapid Gut Reset, Inner Circle, Root Cause Reset, Detox Nation, and other programs. In her one-on-one work and group work coaching, Sinclair tackles biochemical protocols, parasympathetic system therapies, somatic trauma release, family systems work, family constellations, ART, PK, NLP, and symbolic modeling, as well as practical detox principles in functional medicine and functional nutrition. As a CNC and certified toxicity and detox specialist, she relies heavily on emerging data in the rapidly evolving field of new health. And importantly, as a survivor of complex chronic illness and serious trauma herself, she's able to support her clients through their health journeys with deep shared understanding and total joy in her triumphs. Sinclair, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Hi, Heidi. I'm blushing. My goodness. Thank you for the warm intro. That was so lovely. I love seeing some familiar faces on here too. I'm so happy that we get to be here together and dive into one of my very favorite topics because it's so juicy and it's so fixable.
So today we're going to talk about glyphosate. And I feel like glyphosate is this thing, right? We hear so much about it. We know about it. But I feel like for a lot of us, we have this sort of surface level understanding of it. We know it's bad. We know it's impacting us. We know it's ubiquitous. We know we have to consider it. We know enough to say, like, eat organic and be mindful of water sources and these pieces. But the real deep dive, that's what we're going to do today. We're going to go in and really understand, like, what is glyphosate doing to us? Where are we getting exposed? And the most important piece in all of this, how can we help our clients mitigate the impact of this? So let's just start from the beginning. Sinclair, like, can you walk us through the basics of, like, what is glyphosate and really what is it doing to us beyond the basics?
I can. And I also really want to affirm what you just said in terms of the frame for this conversation, because you're right. So many of us, especially natural health practitioners, are operating with a surface understanding, and we think like, okay, the headlines about glyphosate, it's bad, and that awareness has kind of come and gone, and now it's just around, and we say in passing, many of us, like, oh yeah, and by the way, you should eat organic as often as possible. But the truth is, if you take a closer look at glyphosate, you'll see why that's not enough, and you'll also start to recognize your patients and clients and a much wider range of symptoms than you may previously have attributed to glyphosate. And so not only do I think we need to be taking a closer look at something that, yes, has become ubiquitous in exposure, but look at those pathways of exposure, and also what can we do about it clinically? Because there's so much that we can do. I don't talk about anything, my audience knows, I don't talk about anything that's not fixable. So I get to come in and say, poison, yay! Let's talk about this. Let's unpack it, because the truth is, it's very much a message of hope, and a lot can get done if a few people band together at the activism front. And there's a lot that can be done if glyphosate is already impacting your health and has been for quite some time. So it's never too late. So let's just dive right in and let's become glyphosate literate today at a whole new level, and really empower you to take charge with your clients and help them feel empowered on this topic as well. My whole thing is no shame, no blame, because for me personally, I was quite the slow learner on my health journey. I wanted the white coats to fix me. I wanted a magic pill. I was shocked that there wasn't one. It took me years. I wish that there was like one aha moment for me, but I ended up in the hospital, and before I really took my symptoms seriously. And it was 8 years of recovery after that for me personally. So when you go through complex chronic illness, you hopefully come out the other side, as so many of you have, why you ended up on your journey as a practitioner, with a lot of compassion. So this is a no judgment zone. Perhaps we've been dismissive of this in the past. We're not always perfect. Maybe we had our kids eat out. Like, that's fine. It's all fixable now, but we do have to understand the consequences of these exposures. So that's why we're focusing on the impact. In order to do that, we need to kind of set the landscape a little bit. So when you think about it, we've actually had dramatic, rapid shifts in our food culture and our food production. So in 1950, 90% of Americans had their own garden, right? Remember victory gardens? Our grandmas all had those, and most food sources were actually still grown locally with almost no chemical farming. Here's the problem. In the 1950s, they were actually dealing with an oil surplus because there was all this oil supply that was going towards the war effort, and then that oil had nowhere to go, and they were trying to stabilize the economy and figure out what to do with it in that post-World War II era. And they actually figured out very quickly a number of easy ways to sell it to the public, and they called it the Green Revolution, of all things. So the Green Revolution is actually petrochemicals sprayed on plants, sprayed on crops, because it made the crops look deeper green and appear larger, but they were actually very toxic. And this was not really well understood until, Rachel Carson, of course, the author of Silent Spring, she was one of the first to really sound the alarm about this in the 1960s. But in the 50s, this took off, and it was literally called the Green Revolution, which just blows my mind that it worked so well. And that was really, off to the races in terms of petrochemicals sprayed on crops. And it was all to solve this oil surplus problem post-World War II. So fast forward to today, 1 out of 250 Americans have their own garden, and instead of 90% of Americans. And most of the food we buy is chemically raised we're using herbicides, pesticides, and of course, fungicides. So it's a rapid shift in just a couple of short generations. So grandma and grandpa smoked, they drank, they ate red meat, they, had potatoes, and they were super resilient and hardy in many ways. And fast forward to their grandkids, who are, early on allergies, skin issues, eczema, attention issues. Like it's a rapid shift just from our food issues alone, or our food production. So 61% of Americans now report chronic digestive issues. And that wasn't a thing. 6 out of 10 American adults have a chronic condition today that's diagnosed versus 4% of American adults in 1960. Have we gotten better at diagnosing things? Sure, of course. And that's still a radical shift, right? So what role does glyphosate play in it? Well, it turns out quite a big one, because it is the most widely used herbicide today, with over 3.5 billion pounds applied annually worldwide. China is the biggest producer of glyphosate, and it's also the biggest user of glyphosate. And it's also one of the biggest worldwide producers of food. Much of your organic food is actually produced in China. So we really want to ask our questions about what is local. How can we tell? How can we verify that something was grown locally? How can we verify that it was actually made organic? I've had to make a lot of work trips to China, and watching how they produce food is actually pretty terrifying. And the lawlessness and the lack of enforcement around this piece is deeply concerning. And they have a really big issue over there with food quality and with poisoning themselves and each other. And there are these huge scandals about, breast milk with lead poisoning in them, and really high levels of glyphosate, right? Kidney disease. People are, literally shutting down as they're applying glyphosate onto the fields. Their kidneys are shutting down at very young ages. And so this is China's big secret right now. And it's being kept because they monitor their own news so well. It's being kept within their borders somewhat, but we really have to understand just what this does to us. And of course, it is being applied here in the United States. And we have much looser litigation or regulations around glyphosate than, say, Europe does. So we have to understand what it does to us. It's a strong metal chelator, right? We know this. It was actually originally designed to clean mineral scaling out of boiler systems. So to descale pipes, it's so good at mobilizing mineral buildup because it actually cuts it off and mobilizes it. And then they realized, oh, wait a minute, it also kills everything in the water supply. That's kind of cool. What can we do with that? And now it's primarily used as an herbicide and a desiccant. Does anybody know what a desiccant is? This is going to turn out to be really important for you and your clients. So a desiccant is something that is sprayed on a crop to help speed up the harvest. It dries up a grain or a legume to help it actually be easier to gather and harvest it. So harvest becomes cheaper when you spray glyphosate as a desiccant. And guess what? Your organic grains and legumes, it's entirely legal to spray glyphosate on them as a desiccant because it's not considered a growing agent at that time and therefore doesn't hurt your organic label. So that helps to go a long way to explain why some of the case studies I'll show today, people think that they're eating completely organic, very healthy lifestyles and really struggling with health issues still. And they don't realize just how high their exposure to glyphosate is because they think they're doing everything right. And so they don't recognize the signs of leaky gut. They don't recognize these downstream issues that's caused by glyphosate. So this is a big deal. It is also a broad spectrum antibiotic, and we'll talk about that more in a second, but it is primarily today used as an herbicide and as a desiccant. It is the active ingredient in Roundup. That's not the only product that it's used in. Roundup is, what made Monsanto famous. Monsanto was the first company, we'll talk about this in its history in a second, to bring GMO glyphosate like Roundup ready crops to the world. And now it's owned by Bayer, and they're a very interesting company. So let's dig into the details. This was first discovered as an herbicide in 1970 by Monsanto scientist John Franz, and that was when it was patented as such. So it's actually the second patent because the first patent is, of course, a chelator. That's going to be important for you to remember later when we talk about the different health conditions that glyphosate can create or contribute to, because we don't want chelators running through our body that preferentially kick out happy minerals that we must have in order to have a functioning nervous system. For one of many things. So we had to start connecting the dots early here. 1974, Monsanto brought glyphosate to the market in 1974 under the trade name Roundup. Their tagline, safer than water. Amazing, right? 1982, Monsanto was already working on creating Roundup Ready genetically modified crops. 1984 was when they brought the ad to the Super Bowl where the guy walks out onto his driveway with the Monsanto Roundup sprayer and sprays the dandelion in the crack on his driveway as if he's like going to war. And it was the coolest ad for a weed killer and a home improvement thing that the world had ever seen. And sales shot up right then. And people started using it immediately in ways that had not been, approved, because people aren't reading the labels. They don't understand instructions. So when you look at home use for glyphosate, it's often off label and it's in much higher concentrates that are really, really problematic to people's health. So then we go to 1985, where the United States Environmental Protection Agency classifies glyphosate as a Class C carcinogen. Oh, but don't worry. When we considered like the carcinogenic potential of glyphosate, we actually roll that back in consensus review dated March 4th, and we start seeing that early pushback in lobbying from this is definitely a carcinogen. Well, it's a potential carcinogen. No, it's definitely a carcinogen. Well, probably, but legally though, still a potential carcinogen. Okay, sure. Monsanto also tries to persuade the US EPA that glyphosate is not a possible human carcinogen. That's what its next line of defense was. Well, maybe that happens to like small mammals, but not to humans. Okay, explain to me at a DNA level the difference between a small mammal and a human, and you'll be surprised there's like very little difference, right? Like less than 3%. Okay, so then Monsanto strikes a deal with Asgrow to create Roundup Ready genetically modified crops for commercial markets. So they were working on this in the 80s. By 1996, we're seeing that introduction of Roundup Ready soybeans. The Clinton administration signs a sweeping legislation allowing for this to happen without further research. So there were a couple of executive orders that are very interesting on that front. I encourage you to go back and nerd out if you want to, and I'll give you sources for future reading if you want to be a nerd like me at the end. And then in 1998, we get that introduction of Roundup Ready corn. Interesting to me, my personal health went off the rails at the rate that glyphosate was introduced to, the food supply. So I love this topic. In 2010, glyphosate was patented by Monsanto as an antibiotic. And that's really interesting because it's actually a broad range antibiotic. It is not strain specific in the gut, like some of our, quote unquote designer antibiotics today. It's actually quite broad range. And that has really interesting implications, right? And even the WHO's cancer agency classifies glyphosate as probably carcinogenic, not possibly, but probably in 2015. And in 2016, University of California, San Francisco discovers glyphosate in 93% of urine samples collected across the US. And then, of course, we see liver disease at low doses of Roundup in 2017. That was a groundbreaking study. We also start to see the details of the reality of the 30-year glyphosate cover-up start to come unglued and disseminated to the public as part of a series of Roundup cancer court cases. And then in 2018, Monsanto loses that landmark Roundup cancer trial that, hit the news and was actually covered really well, and had to pay $78 million in damages, which is basically the equivalent of a speeding ticket for them. So this is really interesting stuff. So let's slow down and let's look at the patents that we heard. It's a chelator, right? That was its original patent. That's going to have problems for us because not only is that going to mobilize heavy metals within us, but it's also going to mobilize happy minerals, so to speak, that we absolutely need to thrive and stay alive. It's also going to chelate happy minerals out of your plants as they are growing. And it's one of the main reasons that scholars today attribute our soil death, to our gut issues today and our chronic health issues today, and how we are all depleted of minerals. We're essentially starting on the back foot, all of us, if we're eating conventionally grown food. This right here is the smoking gun. And then, of course, it's an herbicide. That's not so great. And it's patented as an antibiotic. So for context, if we're microdosing glyphosate, even in organic produce, because of crop drift, because it's being sprayed legally as a desiccant on organic crops, because it's in the water table now, because it is water soluble. And so we call the Mississippi River, especially where it starts to down in the tributary, down at the lower part of the southern United States, we call that Cancer Alley for a reason, because per capita, we have the highest instance of cancer in the nation. And it's also the highest levels of glyphosate. And glyphosate is so widespread and it's so deeply embedded into our water table that you actually have a dead zone the size of Rhode Island where Mississippi hits the ocean. Yeah, so this is like an epic scale proportion, how this is impacting us. So are we exposed to it on a daily basis? Yeah, it's in the water table. It's actually in the rain. It's also in your municipal water. So water filtration is going to become important because your municipalities are not designed to filter out glyphosate. So what is? That's a really important question to start asking ourselves. Because if we're all getting microdosed with an antibiotic on a daily basis from the air we breathe, from the rain, from the water we drink, and yes, from our food, even our organic food, then we also need to consider that we are essentially being microdosed with an antibiotic in unregulated doses. And it could be wildly different from one person to the next, depending on location, water filtration, and food habits. And we know from the data, one course of antibiotics equals a 25% increase in the likelihood of major depression in the following 12 months, and a 19% increase in anxiety attacks and mood disorders. Now, 2 courses of antibiotics equals a 60% increase in the likelihood of major depression in the following year. So if you apply glyphosate to the backdrop of someone else's health issues, maybe they do actually need an antibiotic that, last resort to manage something that's happening for them. It's, a doctor is making that decision with them. It's a proactive decision. It's a necessary decision to save their life. Okay. It's still against this backdrop. And then that doesn't even count all the, rampant, we'll call it questionable antibiotic use, where we're using it and applying antibiotics where they really don't do anything. We're just socialized to ask for them and the doctors give in. There's great studies about that, actually. If you guys haven't looked at the pediatric data on that, how parents push for antibiotics and how pediatricians give in, even when they know that antibiotics won't work. If you guys don't know those stats, you got to look them up. They're really interesting. And that's against this backdrop. This is your foundational layer, food, air, and water contaminated. So we want to consider that. So sources of exposure, you might have clients and patients today. They're like, but I eat organic whenever I can. Like, great. How often is that? Because that doesn't sound very measurable to me, right? Or I eat the dirty dozen and the clean 15. I live by EWG. Great. Can you name them off for me? How much of your diet is that? They can't. They don't. They like the idea of it, but most of them are not in a position, especially if they're not feeling well. And that's why they're coming to you to actually measure this for themselves, because they got brain fog, they got ADD, they got anxiety, they got depression, and they got all the other junk that comes along with glyphosate exposure. So we have to consider our sources. Conventional grown and GMO produce, duh, that makes sense. Then, of course, organic produce, we talked about that. It would be in lesser amounts because of water table contamination, because of crop drift, and also being used as a desiccant. Also in beverages, the more concentrated the beverage, the higher your glyphosate levels. Hello, wine. Especially California wine, really, really sad. Where there are areas of like monocrop cultures of wine, you're going to see a higher instance of glyphosate application, or for organic wine, crop drift. So we want to consider these things. What are our food concentrates where we actually might have really, really high levels of glyphosate that aren't being looked at and regulated at all? And then, of course, we want to consider things like grain-fed meats. Right. So this is where food quality and sourcing really matters, because grain-fed meats, those are predominantly GMO corn, GMO soy. They're great for short-term fattening for bringing an animal to market. So we really want to consider that. That's where grass-fed starts to become a lot more important. Those grasses are not being sprayed with glyphosate. Those grasses are usually on land that cannot be used for other crops, especially if those cows are not in feedlots eating grain that's really toxic, and it's also stressful for the animal. If they're pasture raised, then they're on land that is largely untouched, because it's actually not feasible to be spraying those crops, that grassland. So you can actually trust it. And those ruminant animals are actually going to act as filters for you for these pesticides and herbicides that are getting disseminated so widely. So that's really interesting. So we want to be really thoughtful about our meat sourcing. Is a chicken free range? Because we all know that that's whitewashed. Or is it pasture raised? Which is a really big difference, right? What was it fed? Do you know? Can you confirm? And, I'm just going to give a plug for ruminant animals because people seem to be the most resilient on that. And I'll show you some kid labs in a minute that really underscores that. Then we need to consider our natural bodies of water. Are you swimming in a river that's contaminated? Are your kids growing up in that? Are your kids growing up swimming in a pool that is, full of municipal water where the glyphosate obviously has not been filtered out? And tap water, of course, that makes sense. And air hydration cycle. We covered that a little bit. I'll show you some of these labs. This guy who is phenomenal. He's an Italian chef and he eats only organic and he lives on a golf course. He walks his dog every day. In fact, I'll jump ahead of that because now I'm talking about him. Walks his dog every day for an hour. It's his time on this golf course in the early morning as the mist is rising. Now, golf courses are some of the most heavily sprayed with glyphosate. It's totally unregulated. And as the mist is rising, because glyphosate is water soluble, it'll actually come up with it. So if you have golfers or people who live near golf courses, kids who are playing on athletic fields a lot, you need to consider their glyphosate exposure because you can actually be getting neurological issues because of the way that they're inhaling it. So sinus, lung, brain stuff is very common for people who have this type of glyphosate exposure. This poor guy, his glyphosate was off the charts and he could not figure it out. He and his wife came to us when he was having seizures and he didn't know he had a brain tumor yet. I was like, oh my God, we have got to check your tox labs right now. And it's one of the highest levels I've ever seen of glyphosate. And he didn't understand it and his wife didn't believe it because she's like, run it again. This guy eats all organic. You don't even know what you're talking about. Like, okay, but it turns out because he's Italian, he's eating a lot of grains and he's super healthy, right? Because he's a runner and he's working out and he's lifting weights, but he's spending so much time on that golf course, running with his dog in the morning. It's his meditation, playing with his kids on the golf course all evening long because they're a very quote unquote active family. They're very quote unquote healthy. And this is the result. So yes, he did have a brain tumor. It did have to get operated on. He is a success story. Thank God we got him through the process, but it was a really scary year for him. And there's not a great success rate. And nobody else on his substantial care team from all different types of medicine, all different walks and disciplines, nobody else asked about glyphosate, which just shocks the hell out of me, honestly. Because it's been in the news. So don't assume that other practitioners know what you know. Don't assume other practitioners are going to hold this part of the reins for you if you're collaborating on someone's health picture. You're going to have to do this part. So what other sources do we need to consider? Personal care products and supplements, anything that has natural something or other that's been grown and potentially needed to get sprayed with glyphosate. For example, soy and wheat are really cheap fillers in personal care products. So if they're in there and they're not grown for food, chances are they're heavily sprayed. We need to consider that. They're in shampoos, they're in all sorts of weird stuff, which you guys probably already know because you're nerds just like me. And of course, those parks and sports fields and golf courses, we have to consider that. Don't worry, I'm going to show you a map at the end so you can see who's spraying and who's not, which is really fun, especially for moms. So exposure levels have absolutely increased by a factor of 250x since we started this whole fun experiment. And if you look at the numbers in 2015, U.S. farmers and ranchers applied enough glyphosate to spray about 3/4 of a pound of active ingredient on every acre of cultivated cropland in this country. That is a lot. That is so much. And that doesn't even count your sports parks, your golf courses, your home use. This is so much for somebody to be dealing with, especially when you also consider that people have 20,000 different toxic substances in their body on average. And so you have to think about glyphosate also having this compounding effect. Because, for example, we're also living in the aluminum age, right? Aluminum is getting used in our deodorants. Sure, of course. It's also getting used in our flowers as an anti-caking agent, in our personal care products as an antimicrobial, and also an anti-caking agent to really protect the consistency of a product, especially in makeup for women. It's in your dry shampoo. It's everywhere, guys. It's in your cooking pans. It's in restaurants' cooking pans. It's in Teflon. It's in the can linings. And if you're eating acidic foods, even if they're organic, if you're eating tomatoes that have sat in a can for 2 years, that's acidic enough to leach aluminum in. And of course, those tomatoes also had exposure to glyphosate. So before you even eat that, you have a complex compound of aluminum glyphosate. That's what the chemical is called. So easy to remember, right? Aluminum plus glyphosate equals aluminum glyphosate, which turns aluminum into a neutrally charged protocol. I mean, oh my God, what is this word? I've been talking all day. Particle. There we go. Whew, so close. Particle that actually passes through the gut lining with ease. You don't even have to have leaky gut. So we need to think about the compounding nature of this stuff, right? So let's look at some case studies. You guys hanging with me? We doing okay? I'm assuming you're really, really smart because you're Margaret students. So I'm assuming you're like real badasses. And hopefully I'm sharing something new with you. I would love to know if you guys have heard anything new yet. Let me know in the chat. This is actually the glyphosate tests from Great Plains Labs. I do prefer Vibrant. I do not appreciate how Great Plains separates out glyphosate and charges you $100 just to look at this marker. I think it's highway robbery because everybody should know this marker for themselves. So I actually personally use Vibrant at this point when looking at urine. It's also really easy for you to set up an account. The portal is easier for your patients and clients to navigate. Yay, on so many levels, right? The user experience is much more thought through. However, some of our best case studies are back when we were using Great Plains, so I still keep these images for you. So here's 2 different clients. This woman is 40 years old, and she was eating all organic, quote unquote, but she was eating really heavily on the grain end of things, soy and corn as well, and did not realize that she was getting some cross-contamination. And I also think that she had eaten really poorly. She had only cleaned up her diet 2 years before working with us. And she was a mess. She was not pooping. She hadn't pooped in years. She thought once a week was okay. She had to do extreme abdominal massage and she would cry in order to get a bowel movement done. It's like, how are you living like this? How did you wait this long to come in? And of course, she had some autoimmune skin issues starting up, some rosacea, some psoriasis. She had anxiety, depression, food allergies, and she was super histamine sensitive. And it turned out had an epic case of parasites. So when we started working with her, giving her a foundational layer of mitochondrial support, because glyphosate is so toxic to mitochondria, turned out to be the winner for her, and healing her gut lining very gently and supporting drainage actually reduced her symptoms by 50%. Within 6 weeks. She went from being a nightmare to talk to very compliant and very easy to do the deeper work with because we really emphasize the order of operations. Looking at this woman, for me, glyphosate is almost a reactivity meter. So when I see somebody this high, I'm assuming that they are brain foggy, that they're ADD-ish, that they're anxious, that they're hiding their depression from me, and that they may not be willing to disclose those things to me, or they, because we don't have that relationship yet, or they're so used to it, they don't even notice, which is, most people, to be honest, because this is so common now. Who are they comparing themselves to? They're comparing themselves to each other. And if they're all joking about how they have mom brain, oh, it's just being 40. No, it's not. Are you insane? We've normalized this kind of dementia, anxiety culture. It's bizarre. And we're doing things like blaming social media, which, it's not great for us, let's be honest, but it's definitely not the solo culprit here, right? So contrast that with somebody who is super joyful, very active. This is our 44-year-old man with the brain tumor and seizures who lives on the golf course, who is super, super clean with his diet and has been for decades as a chef. He is kind of OCD about it. But again, eating those organic grains So still getting organic grain crops with, sprayed glyphosate as a desiccant, and living on a golf course. So extreme exposure, not even realizing it. And of course, his kids' lab looked terrible, just absolutely awful. So let's talk about kiddos for a second. Not to pick on vegans, because I was one. I do want everybody to be aware, though, I hope you're already doing the math, that if you are plant-based or if you are vegan, you're going to have potentially a higher exposure. You're much more susceptible to eating less than high quality oils and fats. So you're already a bit on the back foot when it comes to a resilience at the cellular level, because your cellular walls are made from less than resilient fats. So it makes your cell walls more susceptible to not being able to receive nutrients well and not being able to expel metabolic waste and toxins efficiently. So against that backdrop, it's actually harder for you to metabolize glyphosate efficiently, which is really interesting. So you will want to take a look at not just the research around leaky gut and IBD and IBS, but also all the studies that have come out about glyphosate and liver damage. That's going to be key for you to understand if you are committed to eating vegan, because you can't get away from legumes that have been sprayed. So chickpeas grown in the US that are organic have been tested as high as 60% of a traditionally sprayed chickpea. So that's a lot of glyphosate for something that's supposed to have none. So we want to consider these things. This kiddo had crazy skin issues, super common. We are seeing in this generation food sensitivities, gut sensitivities, leaky gut driven stuff, neurological issues that are showing up as ADD, ADHD, anxiety, yes, the A word, autism. There's absolutely an interesting correlation. I hope that you dig into the data around that, because it's fascinating. I'm not here to tell you that glyphosate is the sole cause of autism. I certainly think it's an interesting factor, and we need to take it into consideration. And the good news is that detoxing glyphosate, guys, is a project, but it's not mysterious. We can be thorough about it, and we can drop these ranges dramatically in a few months and clean them up almost completely in a year. So it just requires some systematic approaches that need to make sure that we're pacing our families that we work with and that everything feels doable for them. Then we have a 5-year-old who her parents were super strict with their diet, completely organic, grass-fed animals, wild-caught fish only, very, 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 very clean, no sugar ever. But their kiddo, they were outsourcing her food to the nanny, and the nanny was relying on a lot of like goldfish style packages and things, and they weren't paying attention. So they got this lab back, and they were like, "What are you talking about? This isn't possible." I said, "Great, show me your pantry. I would love to see what's in there." And it was like they didn't want to see it. They wanted to outsource this to somebody else, which I totally get. Life is a lot. And when your kid is starting to have issues as early as 5 years old, this kid had just excruciating eczema, like excruciating. And she was such a happy, sweet child other than this. So she was just getting tortured to the point where she couldn't sleep. And that's when they finally brought her in. But the school nurse would send her home on the regular because she was scratching so much till she bled. And they were like, "Oh yeah, she's just always been that way." I was like, "Excuse me?" Like it's amazing what people will normalize because they don't know what else to do. So we want to make sure that we create a no judgment, no shame environment so that it's really easy to build momentum fast. The good news is this is fixable. That's always where I start. And the 13-year-old here, she was super organic, grass-fed, animal protein. The mom was shocked because she was super uptight and controlling about this child's food. But 13 years old, what is she doing? She's spending all of her allowance on stuff that mom says is not okay at school and with her friends. And dad runs a different household. Dad doesn't share the values that mom has. So this kid was having serious liver issues, see-through teeth, and it really scary, like touching the teeth from the wrong angle and they would crumble right in front of us. It's like, okay, let's not do that. Let's remineralize real quick here. We got to make some radical shifts. And she's making great progress. But glyphosate is absolutely a factor because it was hard on the liver. anything that's hard on the liver could potentially slow down and impede your ability to absorb fat-soluble vitamins. That matters a lot for a growing kid, right? A, D, E, K, we need those for strong bones. So, I think it's worth saying that this picture is still evolving. This was a case that was in the news 2 weeks ago, where the New York state itself actually won a landmark settlement with Monsanto, who is now Bayer, because you actually saw a 1986 agreement to stop making false and misleading claims about the safety of its popular weed killers. So there's still, these are still coming to a head. This takes years. I'm sorry, guys. I think my sweetheart is locked out. 1 second. Everybody take a breath. It's going to be fine.
While Sinclair's gone, if you guys have questions, we will save time at the end. So you can start popping them into the chat. I know a couple of you have done so already, but we'll definitely take some time for questions at the end here. And it's powerful information, right?
Okay, crisis resolved, which is the theme of today. Crisis resolving right now because of us. So this is still happening, and it means that our advocacy still matters, and it matters right now, because the more transparency we can create about this, and the more we can spread this information, the more the tide of public opinion shifts, and the more it's in politicians' best interests to go after these guys, because it makes them look good. And right now, Monsanto Bayer is lining both sides of the aisle's pockets. And so it really is down to us. And I love organizations like, Moms Across America, because they are so good at really holding these guys accountable. GMOscience.org. I'll give you a bunch of websites to look at and to participate in after this, because what we have really seen come to fruition is that it's a few moms banding together that make huge change on every front, but especially in this arena, especially for our children's health, especially with food, especially with big ag. And actually, there's a great example of this that's just been recent. Has anybody been paying attention to Appeal? Anybody know what that is? It's a really scary new product that is being sprayed on organic produce legally to extend the shelf life of produce. Who does that benefit? I really want to know, because I don't think it benefits our kids. The lack of transparency about what's in it is really frustrating. GMOscience.org just did a great write-up on exactly what is wrong with this product from what they are willing to publish and disclose already. They're deeply concerning. So a bunch of moms banded together, including Moms Across America, and they wrote Costco as part of a campaign. Costco responded immediately and said, actually, due to consumer pushback, we have already decided no Appeal produce will come into our stores. This is the kind of change that we can make if we get a little loud and get a little persistent together. And that just happened literally 3 weeks ago. So that's pretty cool, because this is clearly still happening. So I got to cover this territory so that we're all on the same, page here. Healthy gut versus leaky gut. I know you guys know this, but it's really important to understand these tight junctions here break apart very easily immediately on contact with glyphosate. So this is where you get that immune response from, that's distorted from this glyphosate exposure. And this really is, when you think about it, the underpinning of a lot of chronic health issues today is this leaky gut barrier, which means distorted immune response, and a leaky gut barrier because the gut barrier is designed essentially the same as the blood-brain barrier and many other organ barriers. You have the same thing happening at the brain level. So as you clean up glyphosate, not only do you clean up digestion, and your immune response gets the opportunity to recalibrate and can now become more responsive to other inputs that you would want to design in your protocol in support of your patients and clients, so does the brain barrier. And you start to see distress from everyday, limited functioning start to reduce dramatically, and you see compliance go up, which is why we want to prioritize working on glyphosate as early on in the protocol as you deem appropriate, and really get in there early and start chipping away at the issue so that your people have an easier time following through on the rest of the plan that you give them. So yes, we know all about tight junctions. I also want to make sure that you understand gap junctions, which are at the cellular level. So this is an example of what gap junctions look like. So they're actually, the easiest way to describe them, if you guys don't know what they are, is at a cellular level, gap junctions are like apertures that open from one cell to the next, and they send a signal of light, which is received by another cell's aperture. Right. So we actually are emitting light at a cellular level. Yes, we're beings of light, which I love because I'm such a hippie. So yay for us. The problem is those lights go out within 15 minutes of exposure to glyphosate. So we literally stop being able to signal ourselves within ourselves at a cellular level. And it's almost like the cells that touch glyphosate get amnesia about who they are. And they also stop being able to signal, hi, I've been damaged, please come replace me. And so autophagy itself is even compromised. So the rate at which you heal, your body's ability to signal just from one cell to another is compromised. And also, oh yeah, your ability to identify issues and quickly resolve them at the cellular level is also compromised. So this is an important thing to understand. So of course, glyphosate creates ongoing leaky gut, right? And that is also, you could also translate that to many organ barriers that actually behave the same way. And food sensitivities may be magnified in this environment, right? In fact, you could attribute many sensitivities solely to the exposure of glyphosate, and many of our colleagues do. Lectins will irritate the gut lining more. That's why you see that obsession with lectins now, like Gundry's, plant paradox books and all that stuff that captivates the public interest because it's like, that's the problem. Lectin foods. Like, well, we've been eating lectin foods for generations. What are you talking about? Well, what happened was glyphosate, right? So, and of course, gluten, we all have to be gluten literate now, but are they reacting to gluten, most of us, or is glyphosate being sprayed on those grains and people are glyphosate sensitive? These are questions that are important to ask ourselves. So if you are running labs to assess for, your reactivity and your, different sensitivities, I hope you're also running your glyphosate lab, which is part of your tox panel from Vibrant at this point. So no need for an extra expense. And of course, you're going to see mood issues within this population being everybody, because serotonin production depends on tryptophan, which is a product of the pathway that glyphosate disrupts. This is a quote from Stephanie Seneff. She did an amazing landmark research paper on this. She is arguably the most literate person on glyphosate and its effects on humans today, world over. She's an MIT professor. She's one of my personal heroes. Love that woman. And she's written over 80 papers on glyphosate. And she's really been, I would say, the single most important person in bringing this information to the public. So never doubt what you can do. Just one person, right? I do want to cover one other thing, which I think is really overlooked in our understanding of glyphosate today, because we've been talking about the gut, we've been talking about mood, we haven't even talked about yet actually how glyphosate inhibits your digestion of your proteins, because it actually interrupts your enzyme's ability to perform certain really important factors to actually break down and absorb your protein. So yeah, you're going to have serious issues with diets that may have worked in the past with certain balances of protein and sources of protein that are now going to become a huge problem, which I believe is one of the main reasons, or a very interesting reason, I'll put it that way and be more careful with my words, that people who come to us who are vegetarian and vegan are so much more fragile. And they take so much longer to heal. And as somebody who's almost a lifelong vegetarian, that was really, really difficult for me to come to terms with. But ethically, I cannot sit here and not disclose to you that people who have an animal-based diet, who are really clean with their sourcing of animal proteins, clinically, we see them healing so much faster than vegans and vegetarian. And since I work with chronic illness, specifically chronic digestive illness, I have to disclose that information to you, even though I don't want it to be true. Them's the facts, ma'am. So let's talk about how glyphosate displaces glycine, because this is really important. Glyphosate works because it is an analog of glycine. It is so close to the structure of glycine, which is actually the smallest amino acid. And it's super cute and it's super necessary for our collagen and a bunch of other stuff in the body. So Normal collagen uses a repeating sequence of amino acids to generate what we call alpha chains of amino acids. And I'll show you a diagram in a second about this, where every third amino acid is glycine. Here's the problem. When you substitute glycine for glyphosate, it adds an extra side chain that could cause a disruption in collagen's ability to stretch, to compress, to bend, and to twist. So glyphosate, which has a strong affinity for copper, causing localized deficiency in tissues, decreases the cross-linking of collagen fibers and also decreases tensile strength. So losing your tensile strength in various positions easily causes ligament, tendon, and meniscus to tear with normal movements. And cartilage will also be affected and will start to wear unevenly as it does not have shock absorbing properties the way it used to. This is really important to understand because non-contact injuries have exploded in the last 25 years. Coincidentally, I think not, in relationship to how glyphosate has been introduced to the public. So we have little ones as low as 5, 6, 7, 8 years old getting injuries running on, a field with their soccer friends, and nothing happened. They didn't collide with anybody. Non-contact means they were just in an activity of sport and they created an injury. And of course, the older you are, the more susceptible you are. So this is healthy collagen over here. Beautiful compression, ability to twist, to stretch, amazing tensile strength. Actually, molecule for molecule or particle for particle, you have more strength in collagen than you do in stainless steel. It's supposed to be able to take a beating. It's pretty cool stuff. But glyphosate compromised collagen actually looks like this and becomes very brittle and much more likely to tear. And you lose that bounce. You literally lose it. So it's something that I want you to consider. I also want to just leave this here for you to explore because every graph of neurodegenerative conditions looks like this over the last 25 years. Parkinson's, ALS, autism, Lou Gehrig's disease, they all look like this because glyphosate is so good at chelating you and leaving you susceptible to neurological damage, as well as basically undermineralizing you and making sure that you cannot properly synthesize your proteins, among other things. So you have a few mechanisms of damage. This is important to understand, and you got a broad range of issues, right? We talked about cancer today, that landmark 2018 case. We talked about liver disease. We talked about inability to synthesize proteins. We talked about leaky gut, leaky brain. We talked about neurodegenerative conditions. Let's talk about how to help people, right? Because that's all we really care about. We need this to be really, really doable. So first, we want to assess the severity of symptoms, right? Brain fog, fatigue, food sensitivities, gut disturbances, brittle joints, tumors. Like, what's the obvious here? We want to measure in our labs, how much are we really working with? We also want to consider mitochondrial function when setting the intensity of a protocol, because you don't want to kick off a dumping that the body can't keep up with. It's better to ease in and go low and slow on the products we'll talk about in a second than it is to charge in too fast, because you could create other issues. So you want to think about glyphosate as something that's, yes, very straightforward to clean up and excrete, and it takes time, and it can be volatile on the way out the door and create damage on the way out the door. So we want to almost consider it like you would a heavy metal. Like, hey, let's not push too fast. You also want to support drainage along the way. So let's back up to mitochondrial function for a second. We would not add to the body's to-do list, right? Without also making sure it has the energy to fulfill the to-do list. So we want to always layer in some mitochondrial support for somebody. And everybody's going to have their favorite way to do that. And, with your patient-specific populations, clients, I know you guys already have your favorites for that. But we also want to support drainage, which means you got to open the drainage funnel from the bottom up. You can't flush a clogged toilet. So if they're not pooping, don't try to, detox glyphosate. It just makes sense. And of course, we want to support the liver and the lymphatics because this stuff is so deeply embedded in your tissues because your collagen and your joints have been built with this now for years. It's going to take a minute. You're going to start with gut cleanup, of course. But then you're going to need to continue the work for several months to clean up your extracellular matrix and get the stuff processed out of your joints. So we work on drainage, and then we work on gut rebuilding, sealing that leaky gut. And then, of course, we want to create some systemic support for the extracellular matrix, and the deep fascia and the joint flushing will happen last. That's just how it works. It's how we approach it with our chronic illness guys, and it's how we approach it with our pro athletes, both. So let's talk about favorite products. Many people that when I come to a practitioner community, for some reason, this is like a favorite. I don't know why, to be honest, because it's the wrong pH and it's super watered down and expensive. I love Zach Bush. He's the creator of this, Dr. Zach Bush. He's like a preacher in a stethoscope. He's been great for raising awareness about this. He's adorable. And his product, dollar for dollar, is not going to be the best on the market for your patients and clients when they have to balance the cost, with everything else. And again, that pH, way too alkaline to do much good. Because you actually need a lower pH to get deeper into the tissues. It actually supports detox. So don't be afraid of those low pH products. When it comes to detoxing glyphosate, your body can absolutely handle it. And it can be really important to get that work done at the cellular level to have that lower pH. So HMET is by far one of the best targeted products that, yes, it's made of humics and fulvics. And it is specifically charged to target glyphosate, among other things. They market it as something that's good for heavy metals. I haven't seen that in the labs myself. It's not my favorite heavy metal product. But again, this is about going low and slow. So you might actually start with something gentle, like a few drops of TerraPure. HF stands for humic fulvic, in their water every day. It doesn't taste bad. It's concentrated dirt. You get pretty good compliance. And that's going to be much more cost effective than the ion gut support, which is essentially the same product, but in the wrong pH and super watered down. And then you could graduate to HMET over time, which will help get deeper into the tissues because it has long, medium, and short chain carbons, which means it will actually go beyond the gut lining and it will actually start to clean up the extracellular matrix and go deep into the fascia. Unlike most products out there, especially most binders. Now let's talk about how to do deep joint flushing. Because once you have eased in with the TerraPure, started to do some of that gut cleanup, and you graduated to HMET, you can start introducing things like magnesium glycinate. Super gentle way to get some glycine in the door, right? And most people are deficient in magnesium. You get great compliance with this. It's also going to help with their sleep and, their stress and stuff. And for people who have high glyphosate issues, you're going to get great compliance even from kids with the glycine sticks because it tastes like sugar. So wins for that, right? And some people even use this as a sweetener in like their coffee or their tea or their mud water or whatever it is that they drink. So these are things to consider because you are going to be deficient in glycine today. I mean, that's that smallest amino acid, super important for cartilage, collagen, joint health, all of the above. And then we can look also at some therapies. So in terms of lifestyle, we're going to want some gentle daily movement, keeping in mind that if glyphosate is deeply embedded in our joints, you might not want to push super strenuous exercise for someone who's sick. So that's where we look at, vibration plate. We look at infrared sauna. We look at red light therapy, things that can support circulation and start flushing this from deep out of the tissues because your body will attempt to chelate it. And we also want to always consider resupplementing with trace minerals because, again, we're on the back foot if our food is showing up at our plate lower in mineral content than it used to due to our conventional farming methods today. So areas or books for the nerds in the audience. This Stephanie Seneff, remember I mentioned her, she's that single woman that has really brought the world's awareness to glyphosate and really created that 80-page paper or 80 papers worth of body of work about glyphosate. She's phenomenal. Anything that Zach Bush is saying about glyphosate, he learned from her. He never gives her credit. So it's something to be aware of. A woman is out that front. And then, of course, Whitewash is a wonderful book that's super fun to look at the story behind it and how science can get corrupted because we really want to become literate about the the big ag, big pharma, industrial complex. How are these narratives shaped? What are we really exposed to? Because that's really going to shape our awareness of how we can actually get great outcomes for people today. It's not impossible. It just requires some strategy. And Michelle Perro is one of my favorite humans. She's phenomenal. She's a pediatrician who got called to activism work. She's hysterical and really amazing. And she is the physician behind gmoscience.org. Mm-hmm. So I also encourage you to look her up. She's the one who wrote the major write-up on appeal, if you're curious about that. And she's also the one who spearheaded the campaign to Costco, only to find out that due to consumer pushback, they had already avoided it. So very cool stuff. So what can you do? You have actually a major role as a practitioner today. Your patients and your clients respond to you and your attitude as much as your information. If you just say, hey, I'm going to check the box, eat the clean 15, avoid the dirty dozen, your patients and clients are going to go, oh, okay, that's good enough. But if you get really passionate about this topic and inviting, you go, oh my gosh, this is so amazing. When I discovered this, a whole new world opened up to me and my clients, they'll respond the same way. If you shame them, they'll respond accordingly. So we have a lot of control here as advocates. We're really very much coaches who get to frame this up for people. And this can be an inspiring conversation that's really awakening and freeing, or this can be a real bummer of a conversation. And it's really up to you. We also want to, in that process, really consider your patient population or your client population. What will motivate them more? Will it be kid focused? Will it be cancer? Will it be gut info? Will it be stats about anxiety and glyphosate? There's plenty of data to pull from. So find the statistics that speak to you the most and create a little narrative. Use 1 or 2 case studies to tell stories. You're going to remember my Italian chef health nut who walked his dog every morning on his golf course. And he was so sure that he was leading a healthy lifestyle, only to discover with his seizures that he had a giant brain tumor. You're going to remember that guy and the year of hell that his family went through. The sweetest family I've ever met. Oh my God, they love each other so much. It's so wonderful to be able to get him to the other side of that. And we also want to consider our action steps. So Farmers Footprint is an amazing organization that is really getting the word out and is actually supporting farmers on stepping away from Monsanto and how to get them free of that and help them make the transition back to organic. These farmers are often 3rd, 4th generation farmers. They do not want to be the ones who lost the family farm. And their productivity actually goes down substantially per acre when they go the Monsanto route versus staying organic. And they don't know that until it's too late. So they need a way out of that prison. We need to help them. So Farmers Footprint's a great organization for that. You can sign this petition to ban glyphosate. The more signatures, the stronger the movement. Moms Across the World is a very cool interactive map where you can actually see where glyphosate has been banned in parks, in municipalities. And you can actually use their they have campaign resources if you want to campaign at a local school where your kids are, or campaign for at your local parks. The city park department, let them know, hey, this is a real issue. How can we get glyphosate off of our lawns, off of our soccer fields? How can we protect our kids? So there's lots of resources out there for you. Moms Across America, Moms Across the World, Farmers Footprint. These are 3 great places to start. And I'm happy to share my slides with you guys if that's useful for you. This is where Michael and I live. We'd love to have you join us in our Instagram conversation. Same words, detox rejuvenation. We have courses, we have practitioner mentorship. Really, we're here to help spread the word because we went through hell with our health and we don't think anybody else should have to. So thus ends our fast-paced monologue. How about we transition into some Q&A? How's everybody doing? Did you survive? Let me know what interests you.
Loving this and emotional because it's big, right? It's really big stuff and the impact. I mean, things like I had no idea of this role of a desiccant. I don't think any of us knew that, and that you could actually buy something organic that's been sprayed with glyphosate. That is just, it's hard to swallow in all the ways. And thank you for sharing your PowerPoint because I saw a couple questions about that. There's definitely questions, and let's kind of go through here. One of the key questions asked a couple of times is about this. You mentioned order of operations.
Yeah.
So kind of starting from that bottom up. So, if someone has a lot of different things going on, what is like, how do you structure this? Like, it's clear that we need to be thinking about glyphosate as part of any digestion protocol, which is our typical starting point, but share with us your order of operations.
Yeah. So I would always consider the person's level of energy and their reactivity. So, and pace accordingly. So like in our group courses, we make a joke about this and we color code it because of course they can't think and they can't read because they don't feel well. So I think about it in really simple terms. So we have the pink handle with Caroline, we call it gentle healing. We have the yellow, slow and steady. That's your standard dosing. And then we have green means go. You're a detox hero. You've been at this for years. You want to cover a lot of ground in a short period of time. Most people are going to start out in the pink lane. So you want to dose lower when you're considering chelating glyphosate or how to detox it, then you think, basically. So if somebody has an energy deficit and they're already on the reactive side in terms of food, you're going to want to start with mitochondrial support and drainage support because you want to stabilize the body. So, and we also want to consider that just at a very basic dumbed down level, diarrhea is often by the body considered the other side of the constipation coin, right? Where the body is not able to excrete something that is super irritating and it resorts to diarrhea, in response, whether it's mold, heavy metals, parasites, whatever it is, we're trying to deal with something that they cannot get out. So we want to stabilize the gut first. And we want to make sure we have enough energy in the system, not stimulant energy, but deep energy. So, what are your favorite tools for mitochondrial support? You would always want to consider those. And then after that, then you can start playing with binders. We want to get some humics and fulvics into the protocol as early as possible, even if you're starting with 1 drop of, here, let me see if I can share this again.
I just want to say, I really appreciate your focus on, I love that analogy you gave, that you don't want to add to the to-do list if the body doesn't have the energy to add another to-do. I think that is so important. That's very much what we teach with detoxification is you have to be resourced, right? And I think a lot of people jump into, how many of us have had clients who've come to us who've done these crazy radical detox programs when they are already so depleted and they've done so much more damage. It's so well-intentioned and so inadvertently harmful. So I really, really appreciate your thoughtfulness to this because I think it's something that gets missed.
I agree. Thank you for highlighting that because I can't stand these functional medicine practitioners who just come in and wallop and they start with the chelation IVs or whatever it is. And then they're like, oh, you crashed? I'm sorry, you're too big of a project for us. You have to refer out now. It's like, you created that issue. So that's where we would do just like a few drops of this at a time. You can start with a drop in a full glass of water and then work your way up to 10 and then work your way up to 2 squirts a day. And then you could start easing in, a cap of this on the way to bed and work your way up to 2 caps a day. But that would be over a period of a few months for most people, because you're also trying to get other things done in the protocol. So we really want to emphasize resealing the gut, stabilizing the energy and drainage. So making sure that they're excreting, pooping 1 to 3 times a day. Otherwise, they're not allowed to detox, right? Not okay. We would not be pushing things that would be out of order. So to that end, I also like to have some, liver and lymph support by the time you're graduating to HMET. So, there's that piece. And also as you reseal the gut lining, of course, the reactivity always goes down. Right. And, from the food piece, I know that's a particular area of expertise for you guys, so I won't spend that much time on it. I'll just say that we don't want to poke the bruise that we're trying to heal. And we really have to emphasize that, just getting super practical with these people because they're using food as a crutch. We all know it. They already feel fragile. It's hard to pry the irritating foods out of their dead hands. It's really hard. So we also need to do some uneducating sometimes about what they think of as, power foods from the natural health food marketing, where they're like high dosing ashwagandha and they're wondering why that isn't lowering their anxiety. But ashwagandha is a nightshade. And if you have serious leaky gut issues, you're absolutely poking that bruise, especially if you have autoimmune issues. You should not be going anywhere near nightshades. So we want to think about taking a conscious pause from food irritants, even if they're healthy foods. So that can mean eating lectin-free for a time, eating low histamine, eating low, lower oxalate. We want to drift down slowly is how I describe eating low oxalate. We don't want to make huge left turns with oxalate levels because you can trigger an oxalate dumping response, which is very scary and uncomfortable for somebody. So, and of course, you're encouraging them to stay away from top food irritants and whatever is a particular issue for them. They can't poke the bruise that they're trying to heal and expect themselves to heal quickly. So
there's a question here that's related to this, and I think it's really important. And while we're thinking about food day in, day out, I think we all are always looking for new strategies and fresh strategies. You talk about children, right? And kids are eating these things, and the great example, which happens, it happens in my family for sure. We're really strict about what the kids eat at home. And then our daughter goes off to school, and the older she gets, the more independent she gets. And then we see some of the choices that she's making, and it's horrifying. So what are some of the ways that you've coached parents to help their kids understand the impact of these things and get them on board in a way that isn't just like heavy-handed micromanaging?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I actually talked to the kids about this at as close to an adult level as possible. Like, hey, they're trying to sell you stuff and they don't care how good you feel. Let's talk about this. And sometimes, I hate to say it, but you're the neutral party. And you can't outsource this to the parents because it becomes a power struggle. And part of what they're paying you for is to be that neutral force. And your job is to relationship build with the kids. Who does a really good job of this is Lisa Genza of Freedom Kitchen. And she does a phenomenal job of teaching kids of all ages 6 to high teens. She'll even take preschoolers if they're super well-behaved at what comes in traditional flours at this point, and what is blood sugar, and what goes up must come down when it comes to complex carbs, and why eat organic, and what are those food irritants that they're reacting to. And she is so gentle about it and so non-judgmental that it's nice to hear it from a neutral party. So I tell parents not to go easy on themselves, because it can be hard to avoid that contest of wills.
Yeah.
But also it's the Socratic method helps a lot. So, for example, you can start with something like food dyes with kids, because those products that are getting marketed to kids are so colorful. And you could talk about how they create these known effects about, attention deficit disorders and anxiety, and, an increase in, these symptoms within a very short period of consuming these dyes, and that this is known. And if this is known, why do you think the food companies do it? Why would they do that? Why would they hurt people? Why would they market those foods directly to kids? Have them come up with the answer. They figure it out really fast, and then they get super proud of themselves. And if, as the neutral party, as a practitioner, you can also empower them to police their parents, and then they get real into it, because there's always one parent that is not as on board as the other parent.
Right.
One of our proudest moments about pacing this, because we worked with a mom who had lymphoma. And her kids were eating garbage because the dad ate garbage, and it was how he bonded with the kids, was to give them garbage. So we really paced the family, and they watched documentaries together. And that is a really good way to do this with kids. There's great documentaries that are geared towards families now about this. And one of our biggest victories was the 9-year-old who was like the last one to come around. Her parents heard her tell her friends at a birthday party, she refused the cake and was like, I just can't do sugar anymore. It was really cute. They're not going to be perfect, but then when they go off plan, then just say, oh, how did that feel? Actually, it felt really crappy.
Yeah.
What did you notice? Oh, my tummy hurts.
I think that ability to help children and get empowered and understand it themselves, come to their own conclusions, tie into their own. That's one of the key things we're always trying to teach our kids, right? Is, well, how does it make you feel when you eat this or you eat this? Like, what is the difference in how you feel, how grumpy you are or not grumpy, or how happy, how tired, so.
Yeah. And one of the things that I think is successful about Lisa Genza's work, is that she really emphasizes food independence for the kids, and that they contribute to the family table. And they actually make food for their family. and which means they get to make the healthy choices for the family. So instead of being subjected to mom and dad's choices, it's a very different power dynamic.
Lots of I want to just check in on your time, Sinclair. I want to respect your time. We're 15 minutes over. Can you stay for a couple more questions?
Yeah, let's do it. We're having fun, right, guys?
I mean, we've got like almost every single person who's been on this call is still on this call, and that doesn't happen. So everyone is loving this. I can just tell from the numbers, no one wants this to end. So, some recommendations. I mean, we all have our favorites in terms of mitochondrial support. People would love to hear your favorites in terms of mitochondrial support, as well as I saw one here, drainage support as well. So if you can just share some of the key products you love.
Yeah, I'll actually answer this with a sideways answer. One of the things that I like to get people on quickly is MAP aminos from Master Pattern, because it's a combination of essential aminos that's highly, highly researched and has done amazing things for people with cancer all the way through to, systemic gut issues. It's really good at helping to repair the gut lining. So especially because we're not synthesizing and absorbing our proteins well with glyphosate, this is a great workaround for people. So you are going to see a bump in energy from that. You're also going to see an increase in mental clarity. And therefore, of course, from those two things, an increase in compliance with the rest of the protocol. People will bitch and moan because they're difficult to swallow. They're going to ask for a powder instead or a smaller cap. Guess what? This is how it comes. You want to get a powder, it's going to become rancid very quickly on the shelves. So this is specifically very highly researched. The sky is amazing behind all this. So MAP aminos is actually one of my favorite indirect mitochondrial supports for this reason. I also really like, I used to like Cellcore's tinctures for mitochondrial support. They have retired those. Yeah. And their replacements kind of suck, in my opinion. And that's a non-technical term, and I'm just saying that I'm a friend. What else do I like? I like Energy by Bioimmersion. That's mitochondrial food. It's just micro minerals that are just for mitochondrial support. So they go direct to the source. And a lot of mitochondrial support, you got to remember, will have a paradoxical effect for your most fragile people. Because you're adding energy into the system, the body's going to want to deal with that backlog. So they may not feel so good because they actually have more energy to do the work. So you want to ease in slowly with mitochondrial support as well. And Energy by Bioimmersion is one of those products that's lesser known and is great for easing in. And even super fragile people handle it very well. Perfect.
And then the drainage?
I do like Cellcore's products for drainage. I also like, when you're ready for it, BioPure has a good lymph detox tincture, which is really nice, but you're not going to be ready for lymph first. No. You want to focus on bowel support always. So you work on drainage from the bottom up. So whatever it takes to get their bowels moving. I like non-habit forming stuff like Oxy powder from Global Healing Center. That's fantastic. It's ozonated magnesium and it's more effective than, say, Mago7. There's several ozonated magnesium products on the market. And you guys, you got to remember that magnesium is not formatted to be absorbed. No. It's literally just delivering oxygen to the right part of the gut to help mobilize that stuck material. So it's not a replacement for your magnesium. And what else? I like liver support for drainage. I mean, I am known as a liver lady, so I tend to obsess about this stuff, but you don't want to work on liver support until you are moving your bowels every day, because you will get unnecessary symptoms.
100%.
Yeah.
You mentioned documentaries for our families. Do you have any of them?
Of course, now that you ask, they've totally all flown out of my head. I might have to email you my favorites. I do have a list that we keep for our membership, so I'm happy to do that.
Awesome.
Yeah. They're all food ones. And it really is a wake-up call and it gives parents learning at the same time actually takes that power struggle out, because you're all experiencing the information new together. Then you can talk about which part was the most surprising to you, each of you, And
I'm sure you focus on getting the entire family to make these changes. It is not just a one person who is unwell who makes these changes and the rest of the family goes about business as usual. I think that's one of the biggest mistakes I see families make, is like, oh, this one kid is on a special diet and everybody else is just eating the garbage, which makes no sense, but happens a lot, right?
Oh, right. I'm so glad you said that. I totally agree.
Yeah.
Do you have any favorite mitochondrial support you want to just mention while it's top of mind for anybody?
Well, love the MitoPure, love there's one, what's it in the I can see the bottle. I can't remember the name of it. Doesn't taste good. It's a liquid.
Mm-hmm.
Gold. I'm terrible with names of things off the top of my head for that.
Is that the one from Upgraded?
Oh, upgrade.
The magnesium from Upgraded?
No, it's not from upgraded formulas. It's might be Quicksilver, but it might not. The one I can literally see the bottle. I can't, but it's like it's a gold bottle. It's
Oh, the one.
the one. Yeah, there you go. The
Yes,
one.
That's amazing.
That's a great one.
Those I call it horses. I call it my horsepower. It's ultra energy from them. That's also fantastic.
Yeah. Those are a couple of great ones.
We got there, guys. I
Yeah.
knew I was overlooking some of my favorites. Yeah, Quicksilver has some good ones.
And those of you who have taken our level 4 curriculum, we have a whole list of options from all the different angles. I feel like sometimes we get so overwhelmed with so many different supplements. I like ones that can kind of do a lot of different things in one product, as long as the client tolerates that, because that can also be, you have that super sensitive client who needs a product that just has like 1, 2, or 3 things in, so you can figure out if they have a reaction, what it is. So but personally, where I'm at in my like when I think about what I would take, I like the things that do a lot with just one, because it's just very efficient. So
I agree. Yeah.
Yes, Carrie, thank you. Posting the one and Ultra Energy, both from Quicksilver brand, correct?
Mm-hmm.
This has been fantastic, Sinclair. Thank you so much. So the best places for people to contact you at your website, Detox Rejuvenation, the at Detox Rejuvenation on Instagram. We will make sure to include all the handles. If you could give us a copy of the PowerPoint, I know everyone will be thrilled. You are just a gem. And I mean, you guys, did I not say she's a fighter? I mean, I love it. It is, it's just your passion for this, but your commitment to not, and I love that you brought in the advocacy piece, because I think that as clinicians, we can feel really alone. I think the families, the clients that we are working with, they can feel really alone. So knowing that this is a part of a bigger movement, and a bigger community is really empowering. So
yeah, remember, guys, that like humor is super motivating. So yeah, we're the weirdos. Isn't that great? And be a little bit joyful about it and a little bit even perverse. And, then they feel a sense of belonging, and they can integrate it at the identity level. If we help them see like, hey, you're not just the sensitive weirdo that's sicker than everybody else and is therefore the problem in the family or the problem in the friend group. You're actually the cool one who knows what's up. And here's, your band of weirdos that you can happily join, and you belong somewhere now. We all need that. So you're always welcome anytime in our band of weirdos. And we also have a podcast, Your Health Reset. That's really fun. What else? We have our Rapid Liver Reset is coming up in a couple weeks. That's always fun too. And yeah, I'm happy to come back anytime and nerd out with you guys. This is great.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. And you also do a whole bunch of great summits as well. I know you're in the middle of one.
Right? I know Margaret's going to be on my next one. So
yeah, no. So you guys got to connect with Sinclair, follow her work, learn from her, study with her. Those of you, I know there's a small handful of you coming to the Mindshare Collaborative Summit in the fall. Sinclair will absolutely be there. And that will be super fun to hang out in person. So, okay.
Awesome.
Amazing. Thank you,
Have a good
Sinclair.
night, guys.
Thank you, everybody.
And activate. Yes, good.
Okay. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.